Today, we're going to talk about how to build and manage a high-performance growth team, specifically from the lens of a bootstrapped founder with a SaaS twist, because I know that's the main ingredient of your community. So yeah, let's dive right into it. All right, so just a little bit of a unknown random trivia fact about myself. So before founding Growth Mentor, I used to work at a hosting provider, and I taught myself Linux so I could better understand the audience, and started working many long days and nights as well in the data center setting up hardware. And I absolutely love the technology, and I kind of immersed myself into it because I felt like how am I able to sell a product and market it if I don't really fully understand the audience, the persona, and also be able to help them as well. So I ended up doing a lot of tech support at that company too. So I guess what I want to say with this is I like to immerse myself in whatever I work in, and the same really applies to growth marketing. Very hands-on, and I think that this is the number one ingredient that founders should kind of try and have if they're trying to build a growth team themselves. First, you need to apply yourself and put in the reps to know at least how to manage somebody, right? But having said that, though, if you do end up diving very deep in many different things, sometimes you end up feeling like this dude over here. I know I definitely do. You're doing a little bit of everything. Seemingly, you're doing everything in the right way. Like there's nothing glaringly wrong with the way that you're running your team, but like it's just not working. Like it's just not really growing as you thought it should, and you just don't have the money to hire a team of six-figure salaried people that worked in Silicon Valley at Sequoia funded startups. So you have to kind of hodgepodge things together with a bunch of freelancers, right? But this is what this talk is going to be about how to actually build a growth team and do it in a lean and mean kind of way, because I feel like that's in today's economy, like the only way, really, right? Profitability is super important, especially if you're bootstrapped. You just really need to do a lot with less. So this is a screenshot of my team. This is how big we are, not including my 2 engineers, but it's just me, Jessica, a designer, and 3 growth people that wear many different hats, and a video person. Right? And let's dive into something first. I want to talk about what growth actually is, because we talk about a growth team. I think I'm not a fan of buzzwords, and I'm not saying that growth is a buzzword, but it does have certain connotations of magical magic, where you just sprinkle a bit of growth on anything, and then it just like, right? That's not reality, right? Like at the end of the day, growth, marketing should be moving up and to the right, product as well. So it is all kind of growth. But the way I've kind of modeled it out in my head, at least my heuristic for growth that I adhere to is speed times quality, right? All times direction. So any of those values goes to 0, you're done, right? You do the best quality, deploy shit fast, but you're barking up the wrong tree and no one cares. Like the direction's off. Like, what's the point, right? Or if you use AI and you just scale things out super duper fast, high speed, but just trash, like that's also not really going to work, right? So keeping all of these components in mind, right, we need to think about which direction we want to go with this team that we're building, right? What are the channels that we want to focus on, because we literally can't do everything, right? And I really do believe in leaning into your strengths, right? So the cheetah is fast. That's what it does. It chases. It just goes for the hunt. Boom. Alligator has a different strength, and that's okay. Not everyone's going to be able to do thought leadership video posts and jump on podcasts and do all of that. There's other channels to do, but the first step really is introspection and really doing an audit of what your strengths are as a founder, and also organizationally, who else on your team can do good shit, right? And what does that actually look like, right? So once you've kind of defined your strengths and you've done that level of introspection, it's time to start building the growth team, right? And just this is my personal perspective. Like these are the roles that I can't live without now that I've hired for them and I have them. So the first is a design person to have, right? So that's incredibly important. Growth engineer, content, which is I know, very broad. Video, someone who can work with video. Data, somebody that can actually like take insights from the data that we collect. Personality is like an X factor over here, right? So this is a role that I've accidentally hired for recently, like Micah, the new head of content. Just a great personality to have, right? And you could do things with if you have a good personality on the team. Like, for example, she's hosting Growth Mentor Lives, which is the equivalent of what this is, but for Growth Mentor, right? Where you could there's a lot that can be said about that. And then the last one is VAs, which is very useful. And where to find these different roles? The design, very difficult. Like, I accidentally found my design dude 15 years ago, and we've been working together ever since. But generally speaking, I've had a lot of really good success on Upwork. Again, we're talking from the perspective of a bootstrap founder who's not going to be able to afford six-figure or even very five-figure salaries per year, right? So Upwork, Slack communities also has worked really well. I've hired everybody internally that I work with right now on Growth Mentor, and from internally from the community, and yeah, it now comes down to like what do you want to hire? How do you, in what modality? Is it full-time versus part-time? And full-time has pros, cons, as part-time does, and I think that there's no right or wrong answer here. I think that it really does depend. Like for me, I have a couple of roles that are full-time, and I'm very happy about that, because the biggest positive I have personally seen from hiring full-time is it's culture creating, right? You get the right people in, and it just really defines who you are as an organization. And also it's that dedicated commitment, that they're thinking about their work, maybe even when they're taking a shower, and like that part of doesn't really happen that easily if you hire freelancers, right? It's like hired mercenaries. They're doing the thing, and that's it. Don't expect too much, right? The biggest con that I see with full-time, if you want to build a growth team, is that risk of underutilization. You'll hire somebody full-time, and then it's like, like you feel like you have to constantly give something to do, because they might finish the thing that you hired for quite early, because to actually take up 40 hours of like efficient time every week, it's not that easy. Like, you can do a lot in 40 hours, right? And that's also where the management tax comes into play, because now you're managing somebody full-time, and it's like, okay, well, I have to tell that person what to do, and that is a bit of an overhead that you as that founder has to deal with. And that's why I like part-time situations in the very beginning, when you still haven't really fully defined your processes yet, because it'll help you build those processes by doing the reps, right? Obviously, there are some cons with that, the availability, transient nature of them. They come, they go. But overall, I mean, I'm generally a proponent of starting flexible in the beginning with somebody full-time and part-time, and then eventually transitioning to a full-time role. But before we continue, I want to state the biggest like mistake I personally make with hiring people and building growth teams is hiring people I really, really like, because there's that chemistry connection. It's like, you talk to someone and you're vibing and you're like, oh my God, this is great, we're gonna crush. And then you just prematurely like extend some offer, and you're like, hey man, I think we should work together, let's do it. And then they join, and 3 months later, you're like, why did I, like, this isn't working out. And then you have to make the difficult decision to let them go. This happened to me a couple of times. And I just wanted to put this there just to note, in case anyone else has ever gone through this before. But I read this really good article recently from David Hansen, and his whole premise is like, you're not guaranteed a spot on the team, right? And it's not personal. It's just like, it depends. It's different teams, like sports teams, for example, have different standards, right? Like, if you want to go to the NBA and play in that league, like, you have to be world-class, elite. And it's not like a negative thing that you're not in the NBA. You're just like, you're not at that level yet, right? And then there's different divisions below. There's the G League, and then there's college basketball, and you can play in Europe and so on. There's different tiers, right? So you kind of have to ask yourself, like, do I have NBA budget? If you don't have NBA budget, like, don't expect NBA results, kind of thing, right? I think that level of honesty with ourselves is really important. But even if you don't have like MBA, the analogous MBA budget in the startup world, like you can still hire some really awesome talents, and you're just gonna have to make a little bit of compromises as well with younger talents and training them up. And that's where we now transition into like how to actually like recruit for people to join your team in a growth function. And I think the biggest thing that worked really well for Growth Mentor and is the structured vetting process, right? So when someone applies to become a mentor, they have to go through a pretty long type form, and the data is standardized, right? It's very easy to review the answers. You can make conditional logic as well. And I just find this a much better approach to use Typeform or Google Forms or your own form than using the built-in messaging application tool of some of these job boards like LinkedIn, where they just send you a CV and then you have to like sift through, and the data is not in the way that you want it, right? The questions the way that you want them answered. So let's say that you do create a nice structured vetting process application. People start filling it in. It's time to vet, right? Now, I'm not going to talk too much about this. This is something that's we're just going to assume that the people here know how to analyze applications and see who's a good fit. But the main takeaway here is to vet very diligently and invite only the best to an actual interview. Now, when it comes to time to do the interview, I would highly suggest to de-risk your own bias and decision and record your calls and have someone else watch them as well on the team, right? So like I have every single one of my calls recorded using MeetGeek, plug for the tool, absolutely fantastic. Transcribes, AI summaries as well. Get a different perspective from somebody else, from your other co-founder, because at the end of the day, again, with the whole culture creation, it definitely does matter if the vibe is there, and that sort of chemistry is something that you can only see and feel when you're actually on a call with somebody. But okay, let's say that you find somebody fantastic, great. I want to start working with you. How do you begin? Do you give an offer? What would that look like? This is what I've found to work incredibly well, personally. 10-hour blocks, right? So let's say I want to work with somebody. I'll be like, all right, great. This is the open position. We need some help with SEO, content, PPC, whatever that might be. I'd love to start with a test project, 10 hours of time. How much is that going to cost you to get 10 hours of your time, right? And they'll usually say between $50 to $200 an hour. Let's just use that range. But even if it's $200 an hour, it's still $2,000 for 10 hours. And an expert who knows their shit can do a lot of damage in 10 hours of unfocused time, right? And by doing that, you have that test project, and it's like, all right, well, look, at the end of the day, I needed this to be done anyway. Even if it doesn't work out and we're going to work long term, at least I got some value out of it. And we can see if there's that chemistry. If there is a chemistry, then of course you have the optionality to extend an offer for a retainer or a full-time offer, whatever you want, right? But I think just having that bite-sized intro, it's similar logic with why a lot of consultants start with audits, right? So after that, you can just get to work, right? Like start growing shit. Actually, no, it's not that easy. You need to do quite a bit of work to really onboard. And I think this is also a huge mistake that I see founders make, is they don't have a good onboarding process for your new hires, right? So this is an example of the onboarding process that I had for one of my new guys that I hired for Facebook ads. It's a 4-week-long process, and week 5 he got to meet. If you notice at the bottom, meet the rest of the team, right? But the first 4 weeks, it was different projects where there was a very specific task, right, tied to an output, right? So the beginning one was just basically to look through Loom videos where I did user research interviews, and I gave them a whole entire week to listen to all of our not all, but quite a few of our podcast episodes, to read the blog, to analyze all of the to understand our tracking plan on Mixpanel, our naming conventions. Like there's a lot of onboarding that should happen if you have processes already running and a couple of years of historical data to work with. So that's another very important concept. So okay, let's say you onboard them. Now it's time to get to work, right? And this part here is really the hardest part, right? So this is the strategy, So what's the direction, right? Going back to that initial heuristic, what are we actually doing here, right? So whenever I bring somebody on, and we have these quarterly meetings, and we discuss, all right, what are the activity drivers, the actual things that we have to do every month on a regular, the evergreen processes, and then what are the KPIs tied to them that we're going to look at to see if this is actually driving results or not. So yeah, I mean, if founders can't do this part over here, fractional head of growth can definitely help out and facilitate that decision-making process. But I think this is incredibly important. This sets the railroad track of what we're actually going to go and do over the next couple of months, right? So let's say you have your high-level strategic overview. Then it comes down to actually creating a growth backlog. What are the different things that you want to test? What are your ideas here, right? So this is an example of the ones that we currently have open right now. We have different statuses, what's current, what's in the backlog, icebox, and then completed. And then I like to always tie a metric to each one of the tasks that we're thinking about doing, confidence rating, impact index as well. And it's very classic ICE sort of model prioritization. And this is for the one-offs. Another incredibly important thing that I didn't do in the beginning, and now I probably do like on an OCD level, is create processes and documentation for everything that happens more than a couple of times and actually means something, right? So this is a page in Coda that we have, which is basically like Notion, but with the UX that I prefer. And we have all the different processes, which member of staff is actually tied to each one, who's accountable for it, and then what the activity driver is for each process. And an example of what this looks like, just to show the extent of it, this is the Facebook ads one, right? So like exactly literally like how to set up Facebook ads the growth mentor way, right? With the creative testing, our logic behind it, and really going to a level of like verboseness where one might think, well, come on, did you really have to add that? I mean, it doesn't take that much longer to do documentation exhaustively. But the one caveat here is that if you do a very exhaustive process documentation, it does require overhead every quarter or every couple of months to go back over your documentation and make adjustments if things are changing, and to have somebody accountable for that process of constantly updating and keeping that up to date. Work goes on. Obviously, there's going to be need for alignment calls here and there. What I like to do is always document each call that we do and have some sort of action items, because calls are definitely a bit of a time drain, but sometimes I feel like there's no replacement for just jumping on a quickie and being like, hey, let's just talk this through and hash it out right now over this Loom back and forth. I mean, Loom is great, but sometimes you just need to jump on Zoom. And at the end of the day, like it's the for me, what the defining like differentiator of a growth team versus a regular marketing team is that you're numbers focused. You're always the alignment should be data driven in terms of what are our objectives, break that down KPIs, and it's a conversation that cannot be really bullshitted, because this is what actually happened. We did the reps, and maybe it didn't work out as we thought it would, and it's completely failed all of these experiments, right? But that's kind of okay. I mean, as long as you learn something from your failures, it's tolerable. What's not tolerable for me is doing shit and then just like doing it again 2 years later because you forgot you did it and you didn't learn anything from it. But I think that's this component over here where you do the work and then you come and you review the numbers together with your entire team. It's easier said than done. It's a specific skill to have to be able to look at a data set and to be able to come with insights from it, right? Beyond just the obvious of, oh yeah, the conversion rate was really high and the click-through rate, right? But like, okay, great. Well, this cohort here, is responding much better to this messaging over here. Maybe we can do some sort of content series about it and actually use the quant data to come up with actionable suggestions in the next quarterly growth backlog. That takes training. It's a very specific muscle. And just in a similar way, you try and read a menu in a language you don't know, right? You're not going to be able to order food. Like it's looking at the data and actually coming up with insights is its own language, I think, which needs to be exercised. And speaking of which, when it does come time to tracking the numbers, I highly suggest starting like this and not like this, and making dashboards and getting all sexy with how you're presenting and storing your data, right? So like for the longest time, I was thinking like 2 years, like every week we would just create a different row and just all of our top metrics. We would just manually every week. It was a ritual. Every Monday, the team would jump on a call. Yes, it was 4 people on a call, so theoretically wasting 4 hours. But I think it was really important to just ground us all in what we're doing, why we're doing it, and have that level of discourse and talk through things. Now, obviously, we've progressed. We now have Looker Data Studio dashboards and fancy things like that. But in the beginning, I think it's always like this is just good enough, and that's pretty much it on this presentation. Is open to questions and